Alexander.
Good afternoon. I have a difficult mission today to describe you in a short story Solon cases. It's about a man 64 years old with hypertension and diabetes. He was dilated in 1919 on the LAD with a BMS stent, and he presented last December an acute coronary syndrome for which he was dilated on the RCA, and at its time the LAD was occluded. We performed scintigraphia, which shown 20% anterior wall ischemia. So this is the left angio, where you can see an in-stent occlusion at the mid part of the LAD. With the bilateral injection, the characteristic of the occlusion can be seen. There is a proximal tapered stump inside the stent. The length is near than 20 millimeter, and there is some collateral filling via the septal connection, the right coronary. My first option was to begin with an integrated approach with a fine cross and a wire. My first wire was a Provia 6. It's a hydrophilic wire, very useful in in-stent occlusion. It can get inside the beginning of the stent and were blocked at the mid part. So I made wire escalation with Confianza 12 and Provia 15, but with the same result. So my second option was to use a crossbow catheter, but my crossbow stopped at the same point, at the mid part of the stent. Here you can see a dark patch where all my wire were blocked, and my crossbows too, and impossible to cross. So I moved to retrograde approach with my fine cross and Scion wire. Here the collateral filling. So with surfing septal technique, my Scion wire can get inside the LAD, but my fine cross stay blocked at the connection point. So I turn to a Corsair, and a Corsair succeed to cross. I perform with the Corsair tip injection, where you can see that the occlusion, just the distal cap was only inside the distal part of the stent. With a Progress 200, I can get further and get inside the distal part of the stent, but my Progress was blocked at the same point. So, after 1 hour of arduous work, my position is that I have an integrated wire and a retrograde wire only 2 millimeter apart, but impossible to make the kissing wire no kiss. So I turned to another wire because shedding some liter of perspiration and racking my mind.
May I ask something here?
Yes.
Did you have any stent boost available or anything to highlight what was the reason for the dark part?
No, I haven't, because as you can see, it's an old angiography in my cath lab. I have now a new one, but at this time I haven't the stent boost.
Did you try knuckle bus with the Field XT in front of
Yes, it didn't cross. So what can I do? I turned to polymeric hydrophilic and nitinol wire, Jet 25, by the retrograde way, in order to cross inside the stent. So my position after some manipulation, my jet 1025 can get at the distal part of the stent. It was blocked at the same part, but after some manipulation, I can get outside the stent, in front of the strut, through the strut, and get the along of the stent in the subintimal way, and get near my antegrade wire. At this moment, I perform a reverse cart with a balloon 2.5, and after some manipulation, my jet 25 can get inside my antegrade guiding catheter. But at this point, unfortunately, my Corsair was unable to cross the strut of the stent. Hopefully, I used a 3-meter jet 25, and with some arduous work, I can externalize my jet 25, but impossible to cross the strut with any kind of balloon. I try all my balloon inside my cath lab, but nothing can cross. So at this time, you have only two possibilities, the desperate one and the Zen attitude. I prefer the second one, so I turn to my shelves and have a look at some, what can I use? And I just, in front of me, some material in tri. It was over the wire across CTO 1.1 by 10 millimeter. And I said, I have nothing to lose. So I try it, and hopefully it crosses. So I can just inflate inside the strut, and after, all my favorite balloon can cross easier. So I cross first with the 1.1 and 1.5, 2.5. This is the result after the predilatation. I can place a stent 2.75 by 38, but you can see there is some yeah.
Indentation.
Yes. It stays like this, even with a non-compliant balloon 3.0. Stays in the same result. But finally, the angiogram is not so bad. So I decided to lay it in place like this. And you can see that my stent is outside the first stent and the proximal part, and inside the stent at the distal part. I have controlled this patient 6 months later, and the results stayed the same. So that's my short story. For summary, so procedure time is 1 hour and 50, contrast and exposure 3.2 gray, and what the material I have used. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexander. Any comments, Yves?
Alexander, why not a few small rotablator at the end of the procedure to remove the resisting part?
Yes, because I can cross inside the stent with a rotawire. My wire was outside the strut and along.
Yes, but at the end. When you have this stent which is not fully deployed. You can do rotablator there.
Ah, okay.
But there is one problem. You are working in the adventitia. So I think the notch was at the border of the stent, the high risk of perforation. But the other issue is you had a nice follow-up at 6 months with dual antiplatelet therapy. But this lesion remains, and you shouldn't put the patient off dual antiplatelet therapy, I think, in the future.
Okay.
So just for the audience's sake, you actually wouldn't be in the adventitious, you'd be subintimal, where it went behind the stent struts. And we've got a case theory of both laser and rotoblader being used in the subintimal space and been shown to be safe. Obviously, you have to keep the burr sizes reasonably small, but you could have used a 1.5 burr there to try and debulk. Probably what you had to get rid of was some of the metal to help the stent expand. But it is safe to do both laser and rotoblader in the subintimal space.
Thanks.
Well,
sorry.
I think that you're talking about two different things. Yves said to rotablade after stent placement. That's point one. I think in this case...
To rotablade inside the stent.
Yeah. I don't know if Bill was referring to that or not. Bill? Bill, you were referring of rotablade after stent placement or before stent placement?
No, I was saying before he put in the new stent.
Yes.
Because what he's got is he's going subintimal through the stent struts of the old original stent.
You have your microphone now.
So he's going subintimal, then through the stent struts of the old stent, and that's why it won't expand. So you have to ablate those stent struts so that you can get the new stent to expand well. So I would have thought when you saw the NC with a waist, that's when I would have taken a rotoblader and rotobladed the old stent material prior to implantation.
That's why I wanted to clarify, because the proposal of Yves was to rotablade the new stent. Okay, I do have bad experiences from that, but anyway, I think we heard both opinions about that. I don't know if someone has experience with laser ablation, because Professor Colombo has published a series of unexpanded stents that he used local laser essentially to evaporize the tissue around that and then expand.
We have experience with this, but the problem here would not have been solved, I think, by laser, because the laser would not, I don't think, would evaporate the metal. What you're referring to is under-expanded stent with very hard or calcific fibrotic tissue around it. So you actually do inject contrast to create microbubbles, and then you go 80-80 on your laser, and basically you just destroy the area around it. It can be a little scary angiographically sometimes because you just see a lot of dye around the stent, but it works.
Carlo, just want to make one comment here. Personally, I'm not 100% convinced that the under-expansion is related only to the presence of the old stent. From what I can understand here, there was a problem that in this part of the stent, no material could go on, so there was a mechanical reason also. Nobody knows what was within the stent. So I think it should be a combination, because stent can be crushed. This was a crushed proximal part and still have good expansion. So I do believe that it was a combination of material within the old stent plus the limitation that you get from the metallic frame.
It was probably a stent fracture also there.
Sorry, Dimitri.
It was probably a stent fracture in the old stent.
Yeah, I think so too. There was a mechanical reason. Carlo?
I mean, it was more evident the opacity. I don't know if it was a single stent or maybe it was longitudinal compression and two stents implanted, and that area there was a mesh of metal that made it impossible to go through. But what I'm saying, I mean, before thinking of laser or rotablation, I think a long balloon is not the way to expand a very focal residual narrowing. You need a 6 millimeter balloon, number one. If it doesn't work, you have 10 millimeter balloon from a Swiss company that goes to 40 atmospheres. First, let's try those.
I have tried this kind of balloon.
Before we close this, I have only one question. What is this Jet 25? Sorry for being ignorant, but I don't know this wire.
Yes, it's not a wire for CTO wire, but it's a wire very useful but very dangerous, because it's nitinol polymeric hydrophilic wire, is near than 4 grams, and is like Pilot 200, but with more polymeric access. But
last question by Roberto.
Why didn't you use IVUS to understand what
valid.
was going on before implanting your stent? After balloon dilatation, why didn't you use IVUS in order to understand the position of your wire, the fracture of the old stent, and how maybe to go with a non-compliant balloon higher before implant the stent?
For a simple reason. At this time, we haven't the IVUS inside my cath lab.
Alexander, thank you very much. So if you cannot go through, go around. That's the message.